The alpha vampire told the lonely mountain giant, "I need a man and powerful children." The mountains of Urindor were silent, yet they spoke. Towering peaks carved the sky into jagged shadows, and ancient winds whispered secrets older than any mortal could remember. The land below trembled beneath the rule of kings and queens, but here, at the highest ridge, the world belonged to no ruler. Only the wind, the stone, and the lonely hearts exiled by fate. Azrael, the alpha vampire, stood at the edge of the cliff. His black cloak clung to him like living shadow, his silver eyes glinting against the dimming light. For centuries, he had ruled the night, his name whispered with fear and awe in mortal and immortal realms alike. Yet despite all his power, a void gnawed at him, a hollow ache that centuries of conquest and blood could never fill. He had come to the mountain for one reason: Brakthar, the legendary giant whose strength had been sung in half-forgotten songs. Legends said that his blood carried the essence of the earth itself, a force so pure and strong that children born from it could rule kingdoms and bend magic to their will. For Azrael, the prophecy was simple yet urgent. Without powerful offspring, the balance of darkness and life would collapse, and his line would fade into nothingness. Brakthar moved slowly among the crags, his massive frame casting long shadows over the rocks. He had lived here for centuries, exiled by his own kin for a crime that even he struggled to recall. The world had turned its back on him, leaving him alone in the wind and stone. Yet he carried a quiet dignity, a slow-burning fire in his amber eyes. He was strong, patient, and wary, for the world had taught him that trust was a dangerous luxury. Azrael descended the last few steps of the ridge, moving with a grace that belied his size. When he stepped into the giant's sight, Brakthar's eyes widened, not with fear but with cautious curiosity. Few dared climb the peaks, and fewer still could meet a giant without trembling. Yet Azrael's presence was different. There was no hesitation in his gaze, only intent like a predator sizing up a worthy opponent, and perhaps something more. "I have come for you," Azrael said, his voice deep and smooth, echoing over the jagged stones. "I need a man and powerful children." The words hung in the cold air. Brakthar blinked, unsure whether to laugh or attack. "You speak boldly," he rumbled, his voice deep as rolling thunder. "Few have dared approach me, fewer still with words like these. Why should I listen to a shadow that walks in the night?" Azrael smiled faintly. It was a smile that held centuries of knowledge, of victories, of losses too bitter for mortal minds to comprehend. "Because, Brakthar," he said, stepping closer, "the night is empty without purpose, and you are my purpose." Brakthar studied him, his massive hands curling into fists at his sides. "Purpose," he repeated. "I have known only exile and silence. I am no one's pawn, no one's weapon. Why would I be your purpose?" "Because your strength is needed," Azrael replied, his voice calm but insistent. "Without you, the line ends. Without you, the darkness will consume the balance we fought to preserve. And without you, I will remain hollow, even in eternity." The wind howled, tugging at their cloaks, carrying the scent of stone and pine. Brakthar felt an odd stirring in his chest, curiosity, fear, longing. He had spent centuries alone, and yet in Azrael's presence a strange warmth flickered. He did not yet trust this vampire, not fully. But something about the words, the tone, the unwavering gaze drew him closer to a choice he had long denied himself: connection. "Children," Brakthar said slowly, testing the word. "You mean heirs, mortal, immortal?" "Neither," Azrael said. "Something greater, born of your blood but guided by mine. Children who will carry strength and wisdom into the ages. Children who will make the world bow, not in fear but in reverence for what we create together." The giant frowned. The promise was intoxicating, yet it carried weight. Power had always been a dangerous gift. He had seen mortals and immortals alike fall to it. And still, he felt a pull toward it, toward the possibility that he could matter again, that he could belong. Azrael's eyes softened just slightly. "I am not asking for trust, not yet. I am asking for a chance to fight the darkness together." For a long moment the wind filled the silence, carrying the scent of rain and cold stone. Brakthar's mind wandered to the centuries of isolation, of battles fought alone, of nights spent listening to the mountain's lonely whispers, and he felt a spark of something dangerous: hope. "Very well," he said at last, his voice a low rumble. "I will listen. But know this, vampire, I do not kneel to anyone. I do not bend my will. If your purpose requires me to become less than myself, it is a path I will not take." Azrael inclined his head, a shadow of a smile playing at his lips. "I ask nothing of you except the chance to prove that together we can be more than what the world expects." They moved closer together, and for the first time the mountain felt less like a prison and more like a stage for a story yet unwritten. Azrael studied Brakthar's immense shoulders, the way the giant's stance carried both power and caution. And Brakthar, in turn, studied Azrael's calm intensity, the centuries etched into his gaze, the predator's grace that somehow promised protection as well as challenge. Suddenly, a gust of wind roared down the ridge, bringing with it a strange chill. It was more than cold. It carried whispers, ancient and haunting, voices that seemed to echo from the stones themselves. Brakthar stiffened, sensing danger beyond the mortal world. "The storm," he muttered, his voice trembling with something more than fear. "It is not natural." Azrael's eyes narrowed. He raised a hand, black shadows curling around his fingers. "No," he said quietly, "it is not. Something stirs, something that knows we have come together." "A curse long asleep awakens." Brakthar's brow furrowed. "A curse? What sort of curse?" Azrael stepped closer, letting the shadow fall across the giant's face. "One that has waited for centuries, tied to your bloodline. One that will test not just our strength, but our very hearts. If we are not careful, it could destroy us both, or worse, what we seek to create." Brakthar's pulse quickened. The thought of danger was not new. Danger had been his companion for as long as he could remember. Yet the weight of Azrael's words pressed differently. This was not a fight against mortal enemies. This was a fight against forces older than kingdoms, older than mountains. Forces that would demand not just courage, but trust, a trust Brakthar had not given in centuries. "Then we face it," he said at last, his voice low but steady. "Together. But know this, vampire, if your darkness overshadows me, if you seek to use me as a tool, you will regret it." Azrael smiled, a slow, deliberate curve of lips that spoke of danger and promise both. "I seek no tool," he said. "I seek a companion, a partner, and perhaps something we have both forgotten how to name." As the wind whipped around them, the storm above the mountain peaks began to twist, forming shapes that shimmered like frostfire. Lightning cracked in colors that no mortal had names for, illuminating the dark clouds with fleeting, spectral light. Brakthar and Azrael stood side by side, giants in their own right, facing an omen older than either of them. The mountain whispered again, the ancient winds echoing voices long silenced. Azrael's hand brushed against Brakthar's arm, not as a command but as reassurance. And for the first time in centuries, Brakthar did not recoil. He felt a thread of something dangerous and thrilling, connection. "You will see soon enough," Azrael murmured, his voice carried by the wind. "The night is only beginning, and the world we seek to build will demand everything we have." And then the storm broke. Frostfire rained down the peaks, striking stones and snow alike. Brakthar barely dodged a shard that could have crushed him in an instant. Azrael stood unflinching, eyes bright with determination and something else, longing, perhaps, for a bond that had eluded him for centuries. Brakthar's heart pounded, not just from the storm, but from the fear and fascination that Azrael stirred in him. The mountain had never seemed so alive, so full of unseen power. He realized then that this vampire, this alpha, this shadow, was no ordinary being. and the choice he had made to hear him out could not be undone. As night fell fully over Erendor, the peaks vanished into blackness, pierced only by flashes of spectral lightning. Brakthar looked to Azrael, the weight of the coming days pressing down upon them both. "Then let it begin," Brakthar said, his voice firm. "Whatever comes, we face it together." Azrael's gaze softened just for a heartbeat before hardening again with the inevitability of what lay ahead. "Together," he echoed. And high above, in the twisting frostfire storm, something ancient stirred, watching, waiting, and whispering a name lost to time: Brakthar, and the shadow who seeks him. The mountain trembled beneath their feet. The night had begun, and nothing would ever be the same. The frostfire storm lingered long after the first night, twisting around the mountain peaks in eerie, cold light. Azrael and Brakthar stood atop the ridge, watching the unnatural dance of fire and ice. Neither spoke at first. The storm was more than wind or weather. It was a message from forces older than kingdoms, warning them of the trials ahead. Brakthar flexed his massive hands, feeling the earth tremble beneath his feet. For centuries he had believed himself alone, a solitary guardian of the mountains. But Azrael's presence challenged that belief, stirring feelings he had thought buried: curiosity, caution, and an unexpected spark of trust. Azrael, sensing the giant's unease, stepped closer. "The storm is not just an omen," he said quietly. "It is a call. Something ancient stirs. It knows we have joined, and it will not rest until it tests the bond we have chosen." Brakthar grunted. "Tests? I have fought storms, beasts, even betrayal itself. Why should I fear some wind?" Azrael's eyes glimmered like silver under the dim light. "Because this wind carries more than frost and fire. It carries a curse, a shadow from your bloodline and from mine, one that will not hesitate to destroy what we seek to create." Brakthar's amber eyes narrowed. He had lived long enough to know that warnings were never empty. "Then we face it," he said firmly. "If it comes for us, we strike back together." Azrael studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Together," he repeated. The word felt heavier here than in any court of kings or battlefield. It was not a promise of conquest. It was a promise of trust. The next morning, the first rays of sun barely reached the ridge. Brakthar was already awake, moving carefully among the rocks, muscles coiled with alertness. Azrael observed him from a shadowed ledge, noting the tension and precision of the giant's movements. He could see the loneliness behind Brakthar's careful gaze, the silent burden of centuries spent in exile. "You move like a predator," Azrael said softly, stepping beside him, "even in daylight." Brakthar did not turn. "I have had to. Solitude teaches a creature to survive." Azrael smiled faintly. "And yet you remain bound by it. Bound by fear of connection, perhaps." Brakthar's fists clenched. "I have trusted before. Betrayal does not fade. It grows like roots in stone. You would do well to remember that before speaking of trust." "I do not forget," Azrael said, his voice calm but steady. "I only offer choice. That is the difference. And now our choice has been made. We are bound by purpose, if not yet by trust." Brakthar paused, considering the words. He felt something deep stir within him, a part of him that had almost been forgotten: hope. It was fragile, a single flame against centuries of shadow, yet he could not deny its presence. Before they could speak further, a low, menacing hum began to rise from the valley below. Brakthar stiffened. The hum became a vibration in the stone, shaking loose small pebbles from the cliffs. The giant turned to Azrael. "They come," he said, a growl in his voice. "Rogue vampires. They have hunted my blood for centuries, and now your interest in me draws them here." "You should have seen this coming, Shadow Walker." Azrael's expression darkened. "I had hoped we could avoid them, but fate rarely honors hope. They will test us, and perhaps in doing so, reveal what we are capable of." The first attackers appeared as shadows at the edge of the valley, moving with unnatural speed. Brakthar's heart pounded, muscles ready to spring. Azrael's cloak unfurled like a wave of darkness, his eyes glinting silver in the half-light. Together they formed an unspoken pact: fight, survive, and trust each other with everything they had. The battle began with a roar. Brakthar's immense fists smashed boulders, sending shards of stone into the attacking vampires. Azrael moved like liquid shadow, his speed and strength unmatched, striking with precision and deadly grace. They were an unlikely pair, but their synergy was immediate. The giant's brute force and the vampire's cunning created a perfect storm. Despite the chaos, Brakthar noticed the subtle care in Azrael's movements. He never struck without awareness of Brakthar's position, never left the giant exposed. For the first time in centuries, Brakthar realized he was not alone. The rogue vampires were relentless. They moved with hunger and malice, but something in their numbers faltered as the giant and vampire fought side by side. Azrael's voice cut through the clash. "Brakthar, over there, the left flank." Brakthar obeyed instinctively, leaping over a fallen boulder to crush two attackers beneath his massive hands. In that instant, he felt an unspoken connection with Azrael, not of love yet, but of reliance and understanding. It was as if their strengths were meant to be shared, each complementing the other. But then, a shadow unlike the others appeared, a vampire larger than any they had faced, its eyes glowing red like molten stone. It carried a cursed blade that hummed with dark energy, and as it swung, the air itself seemed to scream. Brakthar moved to block, but the strike caught him off guard. Pain shot through his side as he stumbled. He fell to one knee, gritting his teeth. Azrael moved instantly, catching the attacker in a flurry of shadows, driving it back with swift, precise strikes. Yet Brakthar felt something unfamiliar: vulnerability. "You are stronger than any mortal," Azrael said, his voice a mixture of warning and encouragement. "But even strength alone cannot protect you from curses." Brakthar's amber eyes met Azrael's silver ones. "Then help me," he said, voice low, almost a whisper. "Do not leave me alone." Azrael's hand brushed against Brakthar's arm, the first touch meant to heal and bolster. Shadows twisted around them, forming a shield that repelled the cursed strike. Brakthar felt energy surge through him, and the pain began to fade. He had never known strength like this, not just his own, but shared. Together, they drove the attackers back, their movements synchronized in a way that felt almost fated. And when the last vampire fled, the valley fell silent, save for the echo of their heavy breaths and the distant rumble of the frostfire storm above. Brakthar sank to the ground, exhaustion heavy in his bones. I did not realize it would feel like this," he admitted, voice low. "To fight and not be alone." Azrael knelt beside him. "Loneliness is a choice, sometimes born of necessity, but now we have chosen differently. Together we are more than our fears, Brakthar, more than the curses that seek to bind us." The giant looked at him, and for the first time in centuries he allowed a flicker of vulnerability to show. "I do not yet trust fully," he said, "but I will try. For now I will try." Azrael's smile was faint but genuine, a soft light in the dark mountain air. "Then we have begun," he said. "The bond is not yet complete, but it is a start. And in this start there is power. In this start there is hope." They set up camp among the rocks, the storm above casting spectral light across their temporary shelter. Brakthar tended the wounded earth around him, feeling a strange kinship with the land, the mountain itself seeming to acknowledge his presence. Azrael moved among the shadows, unseen and yet ever present, guarding against threats that might rise in the night. As they sat in silence, the giant finally spoke again. "You speak of children, of heirs. Why does it matter so much to you? Immortality is already yours." Azrael looked at the horizon, where dark clouds churned like living creatures. "Immortality without legacy is hollow," he said. "Power without meaning is emptiness. I have lived for centuries, Brakthar, and I have learned even shadows crave light. Even the strongest need something to protect, something to nurture, something to call their own." Brakthar considered this, the firelight casting long shadows across his rugged face. He had never thought of legacy, never thought of purpose beyond survival. And yet, in Azrael's words, he felt a resonance, a thread connecting him to a story larger than himself. Suddenly, the frostfire storm above surged again, brighter this time, lightning crackling in impossible colors. Shadows twisted and writhed, forming shapes that seemed almost alive. Brakthar rose to his feet, muscles tense, eyes alert. Azrael followed, his cloak shifting like smoke. "The curse awakens," he said quietly. "It knows we have joined. Soon we will not face ordinary enemies. Soon it will test not just our strength, but our hearts. Are you ready?" Brakthar's gaze met his. "I do not know, but I will not run." Azrael nodded, eyes glimmering with both caution and something deeper. "Then we are ready for whatever comes next." And in the swirling frostfire above, the ancient spirits whispered, their voices weaving through the storm. "Two shall rise. One shall lead, one shall follow, yet neither shall walk alone. The shadow and the mountain, destiny awaits." The night closed around them, heavy with promise and peril. The bond had begun, fragile yet undeniable, and the world below waited to see if it would endure the trials yet to come. The frostfire storm had faded, but its echoes lingered in the mountains like whispers of a warning. Brakthar could feel it in his bones, the tremor of magic that was older than the mountains themselves. The battle with the rogue vampires had been won, but only barely. The memory of the cursed blade seared his side, and the surge of shadow that Azrael had used to protect him lingered like a pulse in his veins. "Your strength grows," Azrael said quietly, observing the giant from a shadowed ledge. His silver eyes glinted with interest, but beneath it lay concern. "But it is not just muscle. The storm, the curse, it has begun to change you. Are you aware of it?" Brakthar flexed his hands, feeling the energy flowing differently through him. "I feel different," he admitted, his voice low, almost reverent. "It is like the mountain itself is moving inside me. I do not yet understand it." Azrael stepped closer, the shadows swirling around his feet like liquid ink. "It is not yet danger if you hold control. But you must learn quickly. The power in your blood is waking. It will not wait for you to be ready." Brakthar's amber eyes narrowed. He had lived centuries alone, and yet he could feel the pull of this transformation like a tide he could neither stop nor turn away. "I have always fought to survive," he said. "Now I must learn to survive myself." Azrael's hand brushed against his arm, not as a command but as a reassurance. The gesture was simple, yet it carried more weight than any weapon. Brakthar felt a strange warmth in his chest, one he could not name. It was trust, perhaps, or something more. They moved through the mountain paths together, the air heavy with the scent of frost and stone. Each step Brakthar took left a mark of power, a vibration through the earth that even Azrael could feel. The giant's body was changing, yes, but so was his presence. He was becoming more than muscle and stone. He was becoming a force that the world might bow to, whether it wished to or not. As night fell, they reached a plateau overlooking a dark valley. Below, the rogue vampires had fled, but traces of shadow lingered, clinging to the rocks like smoke. Azrael knelt beside a small fire, studying ancient runes etched into a flat stone. "We need to anchor your power," he said. "Not to contain it, but to guide it. Uncontrolled, it could consume you, or worse, draw enemies we cannot yet see." Brakthar crouched beside him, curiosity and caution mingling in his gaze. "How?" he asked. "I have never channeled power like this before." Azrael traced the runes with his fingers, shadows curling and responding to his touch. "Through focus, through trust, and through unity. Your strength and my shadow, they must become one, or the curse will take more than you can give." The wind stirred around them, carrying whispers that were almost voices. Brakthar felt them in his chest, a calling he could not ignore. He closed his eyes, letting Azrael's hand rest lightly on his shoulder. The connection between them deepened, subtle but undeniable. For the first time in centuries, he allowed himself to feel something beyond survival, belonging. They began the ritual under the stormless sky, Azrael chanting softly in a language older than the kingdom. Shadows twisted around Brakthar, coiling like serpents of smoke. The giant focused, letting the energy flow through him, letting the mountain inside him speak. At first, the transformation was subtle, a strengthening of his senses, a resonance with the earth beneath him. But soon his body began to glow faintly with a golden light, veins of power running like molten stone under his skin. His heart raced, not with fear but with exhilaration. He was becoming something greater, something mythic. Azrael watched him closely, pride and caution warring in his silver eyes. "You are ready," he said quietly, "but the true test has not yet come. The rogue faction is only the beginning. There is another, a shadow far older and darker than they, waiting for us." Brakthar's fists clenched. "Then we face it," he said. His voice was calm, but the fire in his eyes betrayed the storm within him. Together, the night deepened. From the shadows of the valley something stirred, an unnatural presence, silent but immense. Azrael and Brakthar felt it before they saw it, a ripple in the air, a vibration through the stones. It was not a creature as they had fought before, but a force, a sentinel of the curse that had lain dormant for centuries. Brakthar took a deep breath, feeling the new power in his veins. He could feel the mountain responding to him, the earth bending subtly to his will. He extended a hand, and small stones levitated before him, trembling like a reflection of his own heartbeat. Azrael's hand brushed against his, and together they guided the flow of energy. Shadows intertwined with stone and strength, light and dark dancing in balance. For a moment the world seemed still, as if holding its breath. "You are remarkable," Azrael said, his voice soft. "And dangerous, but not reckless, that is what will save you." Brakthar looked at him, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "I am learning," he said, "and I am not alone." The words carried more weight than either realized. For centuries, Azrael had walked alone, feared and respected, yet hollow. Now, standing beside the mountain giant, he felt something stir within him, a desire not for conquest but for connection. It was unfamiliar, fragile, and beautiful, but the moment of peace did not last. From the depths of the valley below, the spectral queen appeared, her form shimmering with ghostly light. She was beautiful and terrifying, her eyes pools of memory and judgment. Azrael tensed, shadows flickering at his fingertips. "You dare awaken the mountain giant," she said, her voice like wind over ice. "Do you not know the fate that binds your line? Do you not understand the consequences of this union?" Brakthar stepped forward, chest glowing faintly with the mountain's power. "I do not fear consequences," he said firmly. "I make my own fate, and I will not be bound by curses that seek to define me." Azrael moved to stand beside him, shadow coiling around his body. "We will face what comes," he said, voice calm but hard. "Together." The spectral queen's eyes flickered with something like amusement or perhaps calculation. "Very well," she said, her form rippling. "But know this, your path is not your own. Every choice carries weight, every bond carries risk, and the greatest danger comes from within." Brakthar's fists clenched. He could feel the power inside him, surging and shifting. The storm of change was not only external, it was within him, challenging every assumption, every instinct. And yet, for the first time, he did not recoil. Azrael reached out, his hand resting lightly on Brakthar's shoulder. "Whatever comes," he said quietly, "we face it together, not as master and servant, not as predator and prey, but as equals, partners, friends, perhaps something more." Brakthar met his gaze, feeling the weight of centuries in those silver eyes. "I do not yet know what more means," he admitted, "but I will learn with you." The spectral queen's form shimmered, then faded into the mist. The warning had been given, the shadow of the curse revealed, and the world seemed to hold its breath once more. As they stood together on the mountain plateau, the wind carried a whisper of what was to come. The earth beneath Brakthar hummed with life, responding to the new power within him. Shadows danced around Azrael, alive with intent and anticipation. For the first time in centuries, both felt something rare and terrifying: hope. Not the fragile hope of mortals, fleeting and uncertain, but the deep, enduring hope that comes from connection, trust, and purpose. Brakthar turned to Azrael. "I feel changed," he said softly, "not just in strength, but in myself. This power, it is frightening. But I think I can control it, with you." Azrael's lips curved in a faint smile, shadowed and luminous at once. "You can, and you will. The world is not ready for what we will become, Brakthar, but that is their concern, not ours." The night deepened around them, the stars hidden by clouds heavy with magic. Yet despite the darkness, a thread of light connected them, invisible but undeniable. They had faced the first test together, survived, and begun to trust not only each other but themselves. High above, the frostfire storm had vanished, but its echo remained. Somewhere in the distance, the voices of ancient spirits murmured again. The mountain awakens, the shadow guides, together they rise and destiny trembles beneath their feet. Brakthar exhaled, the power within him settling into a rhythm he could almost control. Azrael's hand brushed against his again, not commanding, not demanding, but offering reassurance. The bond between them had deepened, subtle yet unbreakable. "Tomorrow," Brakthar said, "we continue, we learn, and we prepare. Whatever comes, we will face it together." Azrael nodded, shadows swirling around him like a cloak of intent. "Together," he echoed, "and no curse, no enemy, and no destiny can undo what we have begun." For the first time, the mountain felt alive, not just with wind and stone, but with the promise of a legend being born. A legend of shadow and stone, of vampire and giant, bound by trust, strength, and a bond that even the oldest curses could not sever. The mountains of Erendor slept under a sky heavy with storm clouds, yet the storm was not of weather alone. The frostfire had returned, faint but persistent, as though the world itself remembered the awakening of power that had begun in the peaks. Brakthar stood at the ridge, the glow of his elemental strength radiating like molten stone beneath his skin. His chest rose and fell in measured breaths, yet tension knotted every muscle. Azrael moved beside him, shadows curling around his cloak, his silver eyes scanning the distant valleys. "They know we are ready," he said quietly, voice steady but edged with steel. "The rogue vampires are no longer our only threat. The curse itself watches us now. Every choice, every step will be tested." Brakthar tightened his fists, feeling the mountain pulse beneath him. "I am ready," he said, voice low but unwavering. "I have this strength, I have you. Together we face whatever comes." Azrael glanced at him, a flicker of pride passing through his gaze. "Together," he repeated, "not as predator and prey, not as master and tool, as equals, as partners, and perhaps something more." The wind rose suddenly, carrying whispers that were neither mortal nor vampire. Voices of ancient spirits, the echoes of the spectral queen, and the forgotten ancestors of Brakthar's line. They spoke of fate and legacy, of power and danger, and of the choice that must be made. "You feel that?" Brakthar asked, his voice tight with awareness. "The mountain, it's alive, it knows what is coming." "Yes," Azrael said, "and it watches us because we are no longer alone. Our bond is the spark that awakens it." From the valley below, shadows began to gather. The rogue vampires returned, dozens strong, their hunger replaced by calculation. And with them, something older, darker, and far more dangerous, the cursed spirit that had haunted Brakthar's bloodline for centuries. Its form shimmered with frostfire and shadow, eyes glowing with judgment and malice. Brakthar's chest tightened, yet he did not falter. "I will not run," he said. "I will not hide. This is my home. This is where I stand." Azrael nodded. "Then we fight. Not for glory, not for fear, but for choice. Every bond, every life, every breath matters now." The first strike came from the rogue vampires, a wave of shadowed figures moving with unnatural speed. Brakthar braced himself, muscles coiling like steel. With a roar that shook the mountains, he slammed his fists into the ground. The earth responded, stones rising like sentinels to shield him and Azrael. Energy surged through him, a pulse of elemental power that the mountain itself seemed to recognize. Azrael moved beside him, shadows flowing like liquid around his form. With precise strikes, he struck down the vampires that dared approach, his speed and strength unmatched. The synergy between them was seamless, the giant's raw power and the vampire's cunning forming a force that neither mortal nor immortal could oppose. Yet the cursed spirit moved differently. It did not attack blindly, but tested them, probing for weaknesses in both body and heart. Azrael's silver eyes glinted with calculation. Brakthar, he said, voice sharp, it seeks not only to harm but to corrupt. Control your fear, trust yourself, and trust me. The giant's amber eyes met his. I do. The spirit lashed out, a tendril of frostfire curling toward Brakthar. He caught it with a glowing fist, heat and cold clashing in a burst of light. Pain surged through him, but it was tempered by control. He felt the mountain within him respond, a rhythm he had learned to channel. Energy flowed, shadows and stone entwined, and the spirit recoiled, hissing like wind through ice. Azrael struck then, shadow coiling around his arm like a whip. He moved with grace and precision, driving the spirit backward. But the fight was far from over. The cursed entity was resilient, feeding on fear and hesitation. It turned toward Brakthar again, eyes locking on his chest, the glow of his inner strength visible even in the shadowed battlefield. You are more than your past, Brakthar, Azrael shouted, voice carrying over the roar of the supernatural storm. Do not let it define you. You are the mountain, the storm, and the shadow that guides it. Brakthar inhaled deeply, feeling every pulse of the earth, every vibration in the stone beneath him. I am not alone, he said, voice rising like thunder. I am not alone. Power surged through him, golden light mixing with shadow. He stepped forward and the mountain itself seemed to answer his call. Stones rose, wind swirled, and the cursed spirit shrieked as energy collided, shaking the peaks with the force of their combined strength. Azrael moved closer, their bond deepening with each movement. Hands brushed as they struck together, not as teacher and pupil, not as master and subordinate, but as equals. Each attack, each block, each movement spoke of trust, understanding, and a connection forged in fire, shadow, and the trials of the past nights. The cursed spirit reeled, weakened but not defeated. It lashed again, striking at Brakthar's heart with shadows meant to corrupt his mind. Fear surged in the giant, memories of centuries of solitude threatening to consume him. He faltered. Azrael's hand grasped his shoulder, grounding him. Do not let it win. Trust in yourself, and in me. Brakthar closed his eyes, feeling the mountain within him resonate with Azrael's shadow. Strength, trust, and purpose flowed together. With a roar, he unleashed the energy fully, a beam of molten light and shadow striking the spirit directly. The force shattered it into shards of frostfire that scattered across the valley, leaving only silence in their wake. Breathing heavily, Brakthar staggered but did not fall. Azrael's silver eyes met his, a rare softness in their depth. You have done it, he said, voice low. Not because I protected you, but because you chose to stand, to fight, to trust yourself. The giant exhaled, feeling the exhaustion and exhilaration in equal measure. And I could not have done it without you, he admitted, voice quiet but sincere. Not alone, never alone. Azrael's hand brushed his again, this time lingering. You are stronger than I imagined, he said softly. But more than strength, you have heart, courage, and a capacity for trust I have not seen in centuries. Brakthar's chest rose and fell. The bond between them, forged in shared danger and mutual respect, felt permanent, unbreakable. Yet the battle had revealed more than power, it revealed choices. Every act, every decision, every emotion carried weight. They were no longer simply fighting enemies, they were shaping destiny itself. The spectral queen's voice returned, carried on the wind, though her form did not appear. "So it begins," she whispered, echoing across the mountains. "The mountain awakens, the shadow guides, and together they will reshape what was fated. But remember, legacy is forged not in victory alone, but in the hearts that dare to choose it." Azrael turned to Brakthar, his eyes gleaming silver even in the dim light. "Do you understand now?" he asked quietly. "The danger, the bond, the responsibility," Brakthar nodded, feeling the mountain's pulse and the shadow's rhythm within him. "Yes, and I am ready, not just to fight but to build, to protect, to create." Azrael smiled faintly, rare and genuine. "Then we have begun our true work. The world will know not just a vampire and a giant, but a force united, a legacy born of trust, courage, and choice." The first rays of dawn began to pierce the clouds, casting light across the peaks. Brakthar and Azrael stood side by side, shadows and stone intertwined, their bond solidified in battle and trust. The frostfire storm had passed, but the echoes of power and promise lingered. "You spoke of children," Brakthar said, voice quiet, almost a question. "Is that truly our path?" Azrael's gaze softened, the silver eyes reflecting light like molten mirrors. "Yes, not because prophecy demands it, but because we choose it. Our strength, our bond, it can give life not just to power, but to hope, to legacy." The giant's amber eyes reflected the sunrise, the warmth mingling with the glow of his own inner strength. "Then we choose it," he said firmly. "Together." Azrael's hand found his, the first deliberate hold of connection without command, without expectation. Just trust and the promise of what they could become. "Together," he repeated. The mountains seemed to hum in approval, wind carrying whispers of an ancient destiny. Two beings, once alone in their solitude, now stood united. Shadow and stone, vampire and giant, bound not by fate alone, but by choice, courage, and the quiet strength of their hearts. And high above, where the frostfire had once roared, a new light shimmered, a light born not of prophecy, but of love, trust, and the promise of a legacy yet to be written. The world below and the kingdoms beyond would never forget the night the shadow guided the mountain, and together they reshaped destiny. For Azrael and Brakthar, the story had only truly begun. And whatever storms, curses, or darkness the future held, they would face it, not alone, never alone, and always together.